The scream cut through the night air like a knife, and Cole Oakes didn't hesitate for even a heartbeat before he spurred his horse toward the orange glow that painted the Colorado sky. Cannon City's Main Street blazed with chaos as flames devoured the boarding house, timber crackling and glass shattering in the September heat of 1882. Thick smoke billowed into the darkness, and through it all, he heard her voice again, desperate and terrified, calling for help from the second-floor window where fire licked at the frame. Cole dismounted before his horse even stopped moving, his boots hitting the dirt hard as he ran toward the inferno. Men were shouting, forming a bucket brigade from the nearby creek, but he could see they would be too late. The building groaned, structural beams giving way to the relentless heat, and that woman's voice grew more frantic. "Please, somebody help me," he didn't think. Thinking would have stopped him. Cole pulled his bandana over his nose and mouth, grabbed a horse blanket someone had dropped, dunked it quickly in a water trough, and threw it over his shoulders. The front door had already collapsed inward, so he went around to the side where the flames were less intense. A window on the first floor had blown out, leaving a gap he could fit through if he was fast enough. The heat hit him like a physical blow as he climbed through, the wet blanket already starting to steam against his back. Inside, the world was orange and black, smoke so thick he could barely see 3 feet ahead. He dropped low, remembering something an old cavalry sergeant had once told him about smoke rising and cleaner air near the floor. The boarding house layout flashed through his memory from the one time he had delivered a telegram here months ago. Stairs should be to his right, probably 15 feet through this hell. "Where are you?" he shouted, his voice muffled by the bandana. "Upstairs, the last room on the left." "The door's jammed," her voice gave him direction. Cole crawled toward where the stairs should be, his hands finding the banister just as a section of ceiling crashed down behind him, showering sparks and burning debris. The stairs were intact but wouldn't be for long. He could feel the heat through the soles of his boots as he climbed, taking the steps 2 at a time now, the blanket smoking, his lungs screaming for clean air. The second-floor hallway was worse. Flames consumed the walls on both sides, and he could see the floor beginning to sag in places. Last room on the left. He counted doors, found it, and threw his weight against it. The door didn't budge. Something was blocking it from inside. "Stand back from the door," he yelled. He heard her move, coughing violently, and he kicked hard at the door once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th kick, whatever had fallen against it gave way and the door burst inward. Through the smoke, he saw her pressed against the window, a young woman with dark auburn hair, her white nightgown singed and torn, her face streaked with soot and tears. "Come on." Cole grabbed her hand, pulling her toward him. "My sister's trunk, all her letters, I cannot leave them. You leave them or you die here." He didn't give her a choice, wrapping one arm around her waist and half dragging her into the hallway. Behind them, the room's floor gave way with a tremendous crash, disappearing into the inferno below. She stopped fighting him then, her body going compliant with shock as he guided her back toward the stairs. But the route he had taken up was gone now, completely engulfed, the stairs themselves beginning to collapse. He looked frantically for another way, his mind racing, his lungs burning despite the bandana. "The back stairs," she gasped. "Servants' stairs at the end of the hall." Cole didn't question it. They ran, staying low, the woman stumbling beside him. He could feel her trembling, could hear her trying not to scream as flames surrounded them on all sides. The narrow servants' staircase was tucked behind a door he almost missed, and when they tumbled through it, the air was marginally better, the flames not as intense in this forgotten corner of the building. They descended in near darkness, Cole's hand on the wall to guide them. The woman pressed close behind him, her fingers clutching his shirt. The stairs emptied into a back storage room, and he could see moonlight through a high window. Without hesitation, he grabbed a chair, smashed the window, cleared the glass with his blanket, and lifted her up. "Can you fit through?" "I think so." Her voice was hoarse from smoke. He boosted her up, and she wiggled through the narrow opening, dropping to the ground outside with a small cry. Cole followed, his broader shoulders barely making it through, scraping his back raw as he pulled himself out into the blessed cool night air. They had emerged in the alley behind the boarding house, away from the crowd, and for a moment they just lay there on the ground, coughing and gasping. Then she started crying, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Cole sat up, still catching his breath, and without thinking about propriety or manners, he pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against his chest, her hands fisting in his singed shirt, and he held her while the building continued to burn, the sounds of men shouting and working to contain the fire reaching them from around front. "You are safe now," he said quietly. "I have got you." It took several minutes before her crying subsided into hiccuping breaths. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with eyes that were an extraordinary shade of green, even in the darkness, even with the tears and soot streaking her face. "You ran into a burning building for me," she whispered, as if she could not quite believe it. "You were calling for help." Cole said it like it was the simplest thing in the world, like any man would have done the same, though they both knew that was not true. "What is your name?" "Willow." "Willow Mason." She wiped at her face, smearing the soot more than clearing it. "I teach at the schoolhouse here. I was boarding there while I saved money for my own place. Everything I owned was in that room." "Everything except your life," Cole pointed out gently. She let out a shaky laugh that was half sob. "Yes, except that." Her eyes studied his face in the firelight, taking in his strong jaw, the dark hair falling across his forehead, the intense brown eyes that had not left her face. "What is your name? I should know the name of the man who saved me." "Cole Oaks. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside town. Brought cattle in to sell tomorrow and was just settling my horse at the livery when I heard you scream." "Thank God you did." Willow's voice broke again, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting for control. "I woke up to smoke, and by the time I got to the door, the dresser had fallen against it in the heat. I could not move it. I thought I was going to die in there." Cole's arm tightened around her shoulders. "But you didn't. You are here, and you are safe." They sat there for another moment before the sounds of approaching footsteps made them look up. Doc Morrison came around the corner, his medical bag in hand, his weathered face creased with concern. "Found them." He called over his shoulder, then knelt beside Willow. "Miss Mason, let me look at you. Are you burned anywhere?" "I do not think so," Willow said, but she let the doctor examine her hands and face, check her breathing, look into her eyes. Meanwhile, the sheriff appeared, a tall man named Garrett with a permanently skeptical expression. "What happened here?" Garrett asked, looking between them. Cole explained what he had done while Doc Morrison pronounced Willow miraculously unharmed beyond some minor burns on her hands and smoke inhalation. As they talked, more people gathered, and Cole found himself being clapped on the back, called a hero, offered drinks at the saloon. He accepted none of it, his attention fixed on Willow, who sat wrapped in a blanket someone had brought, looking lost and overwhelmed. "The fire started in the kitchen," Sheriff Garrett was saying. "Mrs. Hendricks left a lamp burning when she went to bed. It tipped over somehow, caught the curtains. The whole first floor went up before anyone realized what was happening. We got everyone else out, but Miss Mason's room was in the back, and by the time we knew she was still inside, the front of the building was too far gone to reach her." "How many people died?" Willow asked, her voice small. None, thank the Lord, though we came damn close. Pardon my language, miss. Garrett looked at Cole with something like respect. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I have ever seen a man do. Maybe both. It needed doing, Cole said simply. They moved around to the front of the building, where the bucket brigade had finally gotten the fire under some control, though the boarding house was clearly a total loss. Mrs. Hendricks, the owner, sat on the edge of the wooden sidewalk, weeping into her hands. Other residents stood in various states of undress, some wrapped in blankets, all looking shocked and displaced. Willow stood beside Cole, and he could feel her swaying slightly on her feet. Without asking, he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "You need to rest," he said quietly. "Where?" She gestured helplessly at the burning building. "That was my home. I have nowhere to go." "My sister runs the dress shop," Doc Morrison interjected. "She has a spare room above the store. I am certain she would be happy to put you up for a few days until you figure out what comes next." "I cannot impose. It is not an imposition," the doctor said firmly. "Margaret will insist. Come on, let me walk you over there now." Willow looked up at Cole, and there was something in her eyes that made his chest tighten, a connection he could not quite name but felt all the way to his bones. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I owe you my life." Cole wanted to say something meaningful, something that would convey the strange feeling that had come over him the moment he had pulled her from that burning building, the sense that somehow his whole world had shifted in the span of 20 minutes. But with the crowd around them and her exhausted and traumatized, all he managed was, "I am glad I was here." She gave him a small, trembling smile, and then Doc Morrison was leading her away into the darkness, leaving Cole standing in the orange glow of the dying fire, watching her go. By morning, Cole was a legend in Cannon City. The story of his rescue had spread through town like its own wildfire, growing more dramatic with each retelling. He heard versions where he had carried out 6 people, where he had fought through walls of solid flame, where he had emerged with his clothes actively burning. The truth was impressive enough, he thought, without the embellishment. He conducted his cattle business quickly, eager to be done with the attention. Every person he passed wanted to shake his hand, buy him a drink, hear the story firsthand. Cole had never been comfortable with praise, had always believed a man did what needed doing and did not make a fuss about it afterward. But people would not let it rest. It was mid-afternoon when he found himself standing outside Morrison's dress shop, telling himself he just wanted to check that Willow was all right, that it was the decent thing to do. The truth, which he was barely admitting to himself, was that he had not been able to stop thinking about her. About the way she had felt in his arms, small and vulnerable and trusting. About those green eyes looking up at him. About the sound of her voice, even hoarse with smoke, saying his name. The shop bell chimed as he entered, and Margaret Morrison looked up from a bolt of blue fabric she had been measuring. She was a handsome woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that did not miss much. "Mr. Oakes," she said with a knowing smile, "I wondered if you might stop by." "I wanted to see how Miss Mason is doing," Cole said, feeling oddly defensive. "She is upstairs resting. The poor dear barely slept last night, but I know she would want to see you. Go on up. The door at the back leads to the apartment." Cole climbed the narrow stairs, his hat in his hands, and knocked gently on the apartment door. There was a long pause, then soft footsteps, and then the door opened. Willow looked different in daylight, cleaned up, wearing a simple green dress that Margaret must have given her. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and without the soot and tears, he could see the dusting of freckles across her nose, the full curve of her mouth, the delicate structure of her face. She was beautiful in a quiet, natural way that made his breath catch. "Cole," she said, and the way she said his name, familiar and warm, sent a shiver through him. "Please, come in." The apartment was small but comfortable, and she gestured him to a chair near the window while she sat on the settee. In the clear light of day, he could see the bandages on her hands where she had minor burns, the slight rasp still in her voice from the smoke. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Alive, which is more than I had any right to expect last night." Willow folded her hands in her lap, then winced and unfolded them, clearly still in pain. "I have been thinking about you all day, about what you did. I do not know how to thank you properly. You do not need to thank me at all, but I do." She leaned forward, earnest and intense. "You risked your life for mine. You did not know me, had no reason to run into that fire, and yet you did it anyway. That is not something I can just brush aside, Cole." He met her eyes, saw the depth of feeling there, and felt something shift inside his chest. "I heard you calling for help." What else was I supposed to do? Most men would have waited for someone else to do it, would have told themselves it was too dangerous, that you could not reach me anyway. She shook her head slowly. "But not you. You just ran straight in without hesitation. That tells me something about who you are." "What does it tell you?" Cole asked, curious despite himself. Willow considered the question, her head tilted slightly. "That you are brave, obviously, but more than that you have a good heart. That you value life, even a stranger's life, above your own safety. That you are the kind of man who does what is right because it is right, not because anyone is watching or because you will get credit for it." Cole felt his face heat. "You are making me sound better than I am." "I do not think so." She smiled, and it transformed her whole face, chasing away the shadows of trauma and fear. "I think I am seeing you exactly as you are." They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily despite having just met. Cole learned that Willow had come to Cannon City 3 years ago from Ohio, following her older sister who had married a rancher. But her sister had died in childbirth 2 years later, along with the baby, and her brother-in-law had moved away in his grief, leaving Willow alone in Colorado. She had stayed because she loved teaching, loved the wild beauty of the landscape, loved the community she had built here. Cole told her about his ranch, about the years he had spent building it up from nothing after mustering out of the cavalry in 1877. About the satisfaction of working with his hands, of watching the cattle grow fat on good grass, of the simple pleasure of a well-built fence or a horse properly trained. He told her about the loneliness too, though he had not meant to, something about her making him want to be honest in a way he rarely was with people. "It is a hard life for a single man," she said softly when he finished. "Isolated." "It can be," Cole admitted. "But I have never minded my own company much. Still, a ranch is meant to be a home. Homes need people in them to feel alive." Before Cole could respond to that, Margaret Morrison called up the stairs that she was closing the shop and heading home. Would Willow be all right on her own for the evening? "Yes, thank you." Willow called back, then looked at Cole with something that might have been nervousness or might have been hope. "Would you like to stay for supper? It would not be much, just what Margaret left for me, but I would enjoy the company." Cole knew he should say no. He had already been here longer than was strictly proper, and staying for a meal alone with her would set tongues wagging all over town. But looking at her face, at the hint of loneliness beneath her brave smile, he found himself nodding. "I would like that very much." They ate bread and cold chicken and potato salad that Margaret had brought up earlier, sitting at the small table by the window. The conversation never lagged, moving from topic to topic with easy comfort. Willow told him about her students, about the challenges of teaching in a frontier town where some children spoke better Spanish than English, where others had to walk 5 miles to reach the schoolhouse, where parents sometimes kept kids home for weeks during planting or harvest. "But they are wonderful when they are there," she said, her eyes lighting up. "So curious about everything, so eager to learn. I have one boy, Timothy, who taught himself to read before he ever came to school, and a girl, Rosa, who can do mathematics in her head faster than I can do them on paper. They make all the hard parts worthwhile." "You really love it," Cole observed. "I do. I cannot imagine doing anything else." Then her face fell. "Though I do not know if I still have a position. All my teaching materials were in my room. All the books I had bought with my own money over the years, the primers, the slate boards, everything. And I have no clothes except what I am wearing. No money saved because it all burned too. I do not even know if the school board will want to keep me on after this." "Why would they not want to keep you? The fire was not your fault." "No, but I am a liability now, a charity case. Small towns do not always look kindly on that." She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "I am sorry. I should not be burdening you with this." Cole reached across the table and gently took her bandaged hand in his, careful not to press on the burns. "You are not a burden, Willow. Not to me and not to this town. You are a good teacher who had something terrible happen to her. That is all. People will help because they want to, not because they have to." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face, and Cole saw the exact moment when something changed between them. The air seemed to thicken, charged with an awareness that had nothing to do with the fire or the rescue and everything to do with just the two of them, sitting in the golden evening light, hands touching, eyes locked. "I should go," Cole said quietly, though he made no move to stand. "Yes," Willow agreed, though her fingers tightened slightly on his. "It is getting late." Neither of them moved for a long moment. Then Cole slowly stood, releasing her hand with reluctance, and collected his hat from where he had left it on the chair. "Will you come back?" Willow asked as she walked him to the door. "Before you head back to your ranch, I mean. I would like to see you again." "I will come back," Cole promised, and knew he meant it more deeply than the words suggested. "Tomorrow morning before I head out." She smiled, that transformative smile that made his heart kick in his chest. "I will look forward to it." Cole rode back to his ranch in the darkness, his mind full of auburn hair and green eyes and a voice calling for help that had somehow called him into something he had not expected. He had gone to town to sell cattle. He had come back with the memory of a woman who already felt essential to his life, though he could not explain how or why after just one day. The next morning, Cole was back in Cannon City before the sun had fully cleared the eastern mountains. He told himself he needed to check on Willow one more time, make sure she truly was all right before he returned to ranch work. But as he climbed the stairs to Margaret Morrison's apartment, he knew he was lying to himself. He was here because he could not stay away. Willow answered his knock almost immediately, as if she had been waiting by the door. She wore a different dress today, also borrowed, this one a soft yellow that brought out the gold tones in her hair. "You came," she said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I said I would." They walked together through the morning streets, Cannon City coming alive around them with the bustle of commerce and daily life. People greeted them both, but Cole noticed the speculative looks, the knowing smiles. News of his visit yesterday had clearly made the rounds, and now the town had decided there was a romance brewing. He should have found it irritating, the gossip and the assumptions. Instead, he found he did not mind at all. They ended up at the schoolhouse, a simple wood building at the edge of town. Willow had a key, and they went inside, the single room echoing and empty without the children. She showed him where she taught, the blackboard she wrote lessons on, the rows of desks she had arranged herself. Her face glowed as she talked about her work, and Cole found himself imagining her here, surrounded by children, patient and kind and firm when she needed to be. "The school board is meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation," Willow said as they sat on the front steps of the schoolhouse, looking out at the scrubby landscape beyond town. "I will find out then if I still have a position. They would be fools to let you go." "You barely know me," Willow pointed out, but she was smiling. "How can you be so sure? I know enough." Cole turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I know you are brave. You did not panic in that fire, even when you were trapped. You kept your head and you found a way to help me get you out by telling me about the back stairs. I know you care about people, about those children you teach. I know you are strong, strong enough to stay here after your sister died instead of running home to Ohio. Those things tell me plenty." Willow's eyes had gone soft, her voice quiet when she spoke. "You see a lot. I pay attention." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, shoulders almost touching, and Cole felt the same pull he had felt last night, the magnetic draw toward this woman he barely knew but somehow understood on a level that went beyond words. "I have to get back to the ranch," he said finally, reluctantly. "I have work that cannot wait." "Of course." Willow stood when he did, brushing dust from her skirt. "Thank you for coming to see me this morning. It meant a great deal." Cole wanted to say something profound, something that would convey what these 2 days had meant to him. Instead, he settled for honesty. "Can I come back? To see you again, I mean, properly, not just to check on you after the fire." Her smile could have lit the whole territory. "I would like that very much. Next Sunday, then. I will come to town after church and maybe we could have dinner together." "Yes," Willow said softly. "I would love that." They walked back toward the dress shop together, moving slowly, neither wanting to part. When they finally stopped outside Morrison's, Cole took off his hat and held it in both hands, suddenly feeling like an awkward boy instead of a 30-year-old rancher. "I am glad you are safe, Willow. I am glad I was there to help you, but I am also just glad I met you." She reached out and touched his arm lightly, her bandaged fingers gentle. "I am glad, too, more than I can say." Cole rode back to his ranch with a lightness in his chest he had not felt in years, maybe ever. The days until Sunday stretched ahead like an eternity, but he threw himself into work to make them pass faster. He mended fences, worked his horses, checked his cattle, repaired the barn roof, and through it all thought about Willow, about her smile, about the way she looked at him like he was something special, about how right it had felt to hold her hand across that table. His ranch hands, Miguel and Tom, who helped out during busy seasons, noticed his distraction immediately. "You have been grinning like a fool for 3 days," Tom observed on Thursday as they were branding calves. "What happened in town?" Cole tried to play it off, but Miguel laughed. "I heard about the fire. I heard you played hero, and I heard there was a pretty school teacher involved." "Her name is Willow," Cole said, giving up on discretion. "And I am seeing her again on Sunday." "About time you found someone," Miguel said, clapping him on the shoulder. 5 years I have been working this ranch, and in all that time I have never seen you so much as look at a woman." "Good for you, boss." Cole had not thought about it in those terms, but Miguel was right. Since building up the ranch, he had been too busy, too focused on survival and success to think about courting or romance or building a future that included another person. He had told himself he was content alone, that he did not need anything more than his land and his cattle and the satisfaction of hard work well done. But now, thinking about Willow, he realized how much he had been missing. How empty his house felt at night. How hollow his victories were with no one to share them. how the future he had been building was incomplete without someone to build it with. Sunday could not come fast enough. When it finally arrived, Cole dressed in his best clothes, the ones he saved for town and special occasions, and made the ride into Cannon City with his heart pounding like he was riding into battle instead of just going to see a woman. He found Willow waiting outside the church after services, looking lovely in another borrowed dress, this one a deep blue that made her eyes even more striking. "Hello," she said, a little breathless, and he wondered if she was as nervous as he was. "Hello yourself. You look beautiful." She blushed, pleased. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, the best place in town, and talked for hours. Cole learned more about her childhood in Ohio, about her parents who had wanted her to marry a banker's son, but supported her when she chose teaching instead. About her sister, Elizabeth, who had been her best friend, whose death had nearly broken her. About the small joys she found in Cannon City life, the sunsets over the mountains, the way the creek sounded in spring, the satisfaction of seeing a student master something difficult. Willow learned about Cole's time in the cavalry, though he glossed over the harder parts, the battles and the losses. She learned about his parents who had died of fever when he was 20, leaving him with nothing but a small inheritance he had used to buy his first parcel of land. She learned about his dreams for the ranch, how he wanted to build it into something lasting, something he could be proud of. "You ever think about having a family?" Willow asked, and there was something in her voice that made the question feel weighted, important. "I have thought about it," Cole admitted, "but I always figured it was not in the cards for me. Running a ranch alone, I did not have time to court anyone properly, and the few women in these parts were either already spoken for or not interested in a rancher's hard life. And now—" Her green eyes were fixed on his face. "Now I am thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe the right woman just had not come along yet." He held her gaze. "Maybe I was waiting for someone worth changing my life for." The air between them crackled with possibility, with the unspoken acknowledgement of what was growing here. It was too soon to put words to it, too soon to make promises or declarations. But they both felt it, this thing building between them like a slow fire, warm and steady and real. They walked along the creek after dinner as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded Cole of flames, but beautiful ones, life-giving instead of destructive. Willow told him about the school board meeting, how they had voted unanimously to keep her on, and had even started a collection to replace her lost teaching materials. "People have been so kind," she said. "Mrs. Chen from the general store donated 3 boxes of slates and chalk. The Reverend's wife gave me a whole set of McGuffey readers she had been saving. Even the saloon owner, of all people, contributed money for new textbooks. I have been overwhelmed by it all." "That is what community means," Cole said. "Taking care of your own. Is that what I am now?" "One of their own," she sounded wistful. "I have lived here 3 years, and sometimes I still feel like an outsider, like I do not quite belong." Cole stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "You belong here, Willow. Anyone with eyes can see that. You are part of this town's fabric now, part of what makes it good. Do not ever doubt that." She looked up at him, and in the fading light her eyes were luminous. "You have a way of making me believe things, Cole Oakes, making me feel stronger than I am. You are plenty strong on your own. I am just reminding you of what is already there." They stood there by the creek, close enough to touch but not quite touching, both aware of the line they were towing. Cole wanted to kiss her, wanted it with an intensity that surprised him. But it was too soon, too fast, and he did not want to rush this, did not want to risk scaring her off by moving too quickly. As if reading his mind, Willow smiled. You are a patient man, are you not, when something is worth waiting for? And what if I said I do not want you to be patient? The words came out soft but clear, a challenge and an invitation all at once. Cole's heart kicked hard in his chest. Then I would say you should be very sure about that, because once I start courting you properly, Willow Mason, I am not going to stop until you agree to be mine. Her breath caught audibly. That sounds like a promise. It is. Then consider me very sure. She reached up and touched his face, her bandaged fingers gentle against his jaw. I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I have never felt anything like what I feel when I am with you. Like I have been waiting my whole life for you to run into that burning building. Cole caught her hand in his, pressed a kiss to her palm above the bandage. I feel it too. Like everything before was just marking time until I heard you calling for help. Then stop being patient, Willow whispered. Kiss me, Cole. He did not need to be asked twice. Cole cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones, and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss started gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. But Willow made a soft sound in her throat and pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and the kiss deepened, became something more urgent and real and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I am going to marry you someday, Willow Mason. I know that is crazy to say after a week, but I know it in my bones. Yes, she said simply. Yes, you are. They courted properly after that, though everyone in Cannon City already considered them as good as engaged. Cole came to town every Sunday without fail, and sometimes on Wednesdays too, unable to stay away for a full week. They went on long walks, had dinners at the hotel, attended church socials together. Cole met Willow's students, who clearly adored their teacher, and she met his ranch hands, who approved of her immediately. Margaret Morrison watched their courtship with benevolent amusement, happy to continue housing Willow in her spare room and serving as chaperone when needed. Doc Morrison proclaimed it the most romantic thing he had seen in all his years in Cannon City, a love story literally born from fire. As October turned to November, the mountains around them began to show their first dustings of snow. Cole brought Willow out to see his ranch one Sunday, wanting her to understand what she would be taking on if she truly meant to build a life with him. The ranch house was modest but well built, a 3-room structure he had put up himself with help from Miguel and Tom. The barn was solid, the corrals well maintained, the land rolling and beautiful in every direction. It is not fancy, Cole said as Willow stood on his porch looking out at his holdings. It is a hard life ranching. The work never stops, the weather is unpredictable, and some years we barely scrape by. If you are expecting ease or comfort, I cannot promise that. Willow turned to face him, and her expression was patient. Do you really think I am looking for ease? I came to Colorado alone at 22 years old. I stayed here after my sister died when I had every reason to go home. I teach 30 children of all different ages in a 1-room schoolhouse with inadequate supplies and not enough pay. I think I understand hard work, Cole. I know you do. I just want you to be sure. Once you are out here, miles from town, it is isolating. Lonely, sometimes, especially in winter. It would only be lonely if I were here alone, Willow said softly. She crossed the porch to stand in front of him, looking up into his face. But if I were here with you, building something together, then it would not be lonely at all. It would be home. Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. I love you, Willow. I have loved you since the moment I carried you out of that fire, and you looked at me like I had just given you the whole world. You did give me the world, she murmured against his chest. You gave me my life, and now I want to give you the rest of it if you will have me. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. Is that a yes? I have not heard a question yet. Cole laughed. The sound startled out of him and dropped to one knee right there on his porch. He had not planned this, had not prepared pretty words or bought a ring, but it felt right, felt perfect in its spontaneity. Willow Mason, will you marry me? Will you make this house a home and this ranch a legacy and this lonely rancher the happiest man in Colorado? Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling, that brilliant smile that lit up his whole world. Yes, yes, of course I will marry you, Cole Oakes. He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, pouring every bit of love and hope and promise he had into it. They were married 3 weeks later in Cannon City's small church, with what felt like the whole town in attendance. Willow wore a dress that Margaret Morrison had made specially, white with lace at the collar and cuffs, and she looked so beautiful walking down the aisle that Cole felt his eyes sting with emotion. Miguel stood as his best man, and Margaret stood with Willow, both of them grinning like they had orchestrated the whole thing themselves. Reverend Collins performed the ceremony with appropriate solemnity, but there was joy in every word, in the vows they spoke to each other, in the rings they exchanged. When Cole was finally told he could kiss his bride, he did so with complete disregard for propriety, dipping her dramatically while the congregation cheered and whistled. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing that went late into the night. Cole held Willow close as they swayed to a fiddle tune, her head resting on his shoulder, both of them lost in their own world despite being surrounded by people. "Happy," he murmured into her hair. "Happier than I have ever been in my entire life," Willow replied. "Who would have thought that the worst night of my life would lead to this? Everything happens for a reason," Cole said. "That fire brought us together. I will never be able to think of it as entirely bad, no matter how terrible it was." "My hero," Willow teased gently, but there was real emotion beneath the words. "My husband." "Your husband," Cole repeated, loving the sound of it. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes to me. I could never regret it." "You are the best man I have ever known, Cole." They left the reception eventually, riding out to the ranch in Cole's wagon under a sky brilliant with stars. The house was dark when they arrived, but Cole had left lamps burning low, and when he carried Willow over the threshold, she laughed with pure delight. "You are supposed to save that for our first house together," she said. "This is our first house together, our only house, our home." Cole set her down gently, keeping his arms around her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Oakes, Mrs. Oakes," Willow repeated softly, testing out the sound of her new name. "I like that, I like it very much." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle touches, two people learning each other in the most intimate way possible. Cole had been with women before, but never like this. Never with this depth of feeling, this sense of rightness and completion. And afterward, holding Willow in his arms as she drifted to sleep, he felt a peace he had not known was missing from his life. Winter settled over the ranch in earnest, and they fell into the rhythms of married life. Willow had resigned from her teaching position, though it had not been an easy choice. She loved her students and her work, but the ranch was too far from town for daily travel, especially in winter, and she knew she could not do both. The school board had understood, and they had thrown her a farewell party where every child had made her a card or a drawing that she now kept in a special box. Instead, Willow threw herself into ranch life with the same dedication she had given to teaching. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to preserve and pickle and bake bread. She learned the rhythms of the cattle when they needed to be fed, when they needed to be moved to different pastures. She helped Cole with the endless paperwork that came with running a business, her neat handwriting filling ledgers with careful records of sales and purchases and expenses. But more than that, she made the house a home exactly as she had promised. She sewed curtains for the windows, braided rugs for the floors, planted an herb garden near the kitchen door that she would nurture come spring. She filled the house with warmth and laughter and love, and Cole found himself rushing through his work each day just to get back to her, to sit with her by the fire in the evenings, to hold her in his arms at night. "I never knew life could be this good," he told her one night in January as they lay in bed, listening to wind howl around the house. "Neither did I," Willow admitted. "I thought I was content before, thought teaching was enough to build a life around. But it is so much more than I ever imagined was possible. No regrets about leaving town, about giving up teaching." Willow propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him in the lamplight. "Not a single one. I loved teaching, and I will always treasure those years. But this is where I am meant to be, Cole. Here with you, building this life together. I have never been more certain of anything." Spring came eventually, as it always did, the snow melting to reveal the prairie coming back to life. Willow's herb garden flourished, and she started a vegetable garden too, ambitious and determined. Cole worked from dawn to dusk during calving season, and Willow was right there beside him, helping pull breech calves and bottle feeding the ones whose mothers could not care for them. It was hard work, exhausting and relentless, but they did it together, and that made all the difference. Miguel and Tom both commented on how much happier Cole seemed, how much lighter, and he could not argue with them. Marriage suited him in ways he had never expected. By summer, Willow had news that made both of them giddy with excitement. She was pregnant, due sometime in late winter. Cole was beside himself with joy, already planning additions to the house, already thinking about teaching his son or daughter to ride, already imagining a future full of children and grandchildren and the legacy they would build together. "I hope it is a boy who looks just like you," Willow said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, her hand resting on her still flat belly. "I hope it is a girl who looks like you," Cole countered, covering her hand with his. "With your green eyes and your stubbornness and your good heart. Either way, they will be so loved," Willow said softly, "so wanted. I cannot wait to meet them." "Neither can I." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Willow remained active despite Cole's hovering, insisting she was perfectly capable of doing her normal work. Doc Morrison came out to check on her monthly, pronouncing her healthy and strong, and predicting an easy delivery come February. But as winter set in again, bringing the first anniversary of their meeting, Cole found himself thinking more and more about the fire, about how close he had come to never knowing Willow at all. If he had been 5 minutes later to town that night, if he had not heard her screaming, if he had hesitated even a moment before running into that burning building. Their whole life together, the child growing inside her, all of it hung on such thin threads of chance and timing. "You are thinking too much," Willow said one December evening, reading his expression accurately. "I can always tell when you are brooding." "I was just thinking about how lucky I am, how lucky we are." "It was not luck," Willow said firmly. "It was meant to be. You were meant to be there that night. We were meant to find each other. I truly believe that, Cole. Even though it took a disaster to make it happen, especially because of that. Think about it. If that fire had not happened, I would still be boarding at Mrs. Hendricks's, teaching my students, going through my quiet life. You would still be ranching alone, coming to town only when necessary, never staying long enough to really meet anyone. We might have passed each other on the street 100 times and never truly seen each other. The fire changed everything. It gave us each other. Cole pulled her close, one hand protective on her rounded belly where their child grew. I love you more than I have words for, Willow Oaks. I love you too, more than the whole wide world. Christmas came, and they spent it quietly together, exchanging small gifts and cooking a feast for just the two of them. Cole had carved Willow a rocking chair from pine, spending weeks in secret working on it in the barn, sanding it smooth and making sure the rockers were perfectly balanced so she could use it to nurse their baby. Willow gave him a shirt she had sewn herself, the stitching perfect, the fit exactly right, and a journal bound in leather where she had written on the first page, "The story of us to tell our children." They sat by the fire late into the night, Willow rocking in her new chair, Cole reading aloud from the journal entries she had already filled in. She had written about the fire, about their courtship, about their wedding day. She had written about the ranch and the life they were building and the love that grew stronger every day. Her words were beautiful, honest, and heartfelt, and Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion as he read. "Our children will know they come from love," Willow said softly. "They will know their parents fought for each other from the very beginning. That is a good legacy, Cole." "The best legacy," he agreed. February arrived with a late-season blizzard that dumped 3 feet of snow across the territory. Cole grew increasingly nervous as Willow's due date approached, worried about getting her to town if she went into labor during a storm. But Doc Morrison had anticipated this and had come to stay at the ranch for the last 2 weeks of her pregnancy, setting himself up in the spare room and declaring he was not leaving until the baby was safely delivered. Willow went into labor on February 12, 1874, exactly 16 months after the fire that had brought them together. It was early evening, and Cole was finishing up the day's work when she called to him from the house, her voice calm but urgent. "It is time," she said simply when he burst through the door, and he saw her leaning against the table, breathing through a contraction. Doc Morrison took over with practiced efficiency, getting Willow settled in the bedroom, boiling water, preparing his instruments. Cole hovered uselessly until the doctor chased him out, telling him to make himself useful by keeping the fire going and the house warm. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning, and Cole paced the main room like a caged animal, jumping at every sound from the bedroom. Miguel and Tom had come up to the house to wait with him, and they sat by the fire, trying to distract him with conversation that he could not focus on. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, he heard the unmistakable sound of a baby crying, and his heart nearly stopped. He was halfway to the bedroom door when it opened and Doc Morrison appeared, grinning and tired. "You have a son, Cole. A healthy baby boy, and Willow came through like a champion. You can come see them now." Cole brushed past the doctor and stopped dead in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sight before him. Willow was propped up in bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. His son. Their son. "Come meet him," Willow said softly, and Cole crossed the room on shaking legs. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby, at the tiny red face and the shock of dark hair and the little fists waving in the air. Something inside his chest cracked wide open, a feeling so powerful it made his earlier love for Willow seem like a pale shadow by comparison. "He is perfect," Cole whispered, touching one tiny hand with his finger and watching in awe as his son's fingers wrapped around it. "He is absolutely perfect. We made him together," Willow said, tears streaming down her face. "He is ours, Cole, our son." "What should we name him?" Cole asked, unable to look away from the baby. "I was thinking William," Willow said. "For my father, William Cole Oaks. What do you think?" I think it is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." Cole leaned in and kissed her gently. "Thank you for this, for him, for everything." "Thank you for running into that fire," Willow said, "for being brave enough to save me so we could have this, all of this." They named him William, but he was called Will from the beginning, and he transformed their lives completely. Cole had thought he understood love before, had thought what he felt for Willow was the deepest emotion possible. But holding his son, watching him grow and change every day, opened up new territories of feeling he had not known existed. Will was a good baby, healthy and strong, with Cole's dark coloring and Willow's green eyes. He rarely cried, seemed content to lie in his cradle watching the world around him with serious attention. Willow thrived on motherhood, patient and loving, and endlessly creative at soothing the baby when he was fussy. Spring came again, and they fell into new rhythms, Willow managing the house and baby while Cole worked the ranch. Miguel and Tom both doted on Will, taking turns holding him when they came in for meals, making ridiculous faces to try to make him smile. As summer approached, bringing Will's 6-month birthday, Willow surprised Cole with an announcement. "I want to go back to teaching," she said one evening after they had put Will to bed. "Not full-time, obviously. But maybe I could teach reading and writing to some of the ranch children in the area. There are at least 5 or 6 families within riding distance who have young ones with no school nearby. I could hold lessons here, a few afternoons a week." Cole considered this, then nodded slowly. "I think that is a wonderful idea. You have always been a teacher at heart, and it seems a shame to let that gift go unused. You do not mind. It would mean more work, more people around." "I do not mind at all. In fact, I am proud of you for thinking of it. Those children deserve an education, and you deserve to do work that feeds your soul." He pulled her close. "We can make this work, Willow. We can have it all together." She started teaching that fall, and soon their house was full of children 3 afternoons a week, learning letters and numbers and basic reading at Willow's patient instruction. The parents paid what they could, some in cash, some in goods, and everyone was grateful for the opportunity. Will grew into a toddler, then a little boy, bright and curious and fearless in ways that gave Cole heart palpitations. Willow got pregnant again when Will was 2, and they welcomed a daughter they named Catherine Elizabeth, called Kathy, in memory of Willow's sister. Then came another son, James, and another daughter, Rose. 4 children in 8 years, and the house that had once seemed too large for just Cole now rang with laughter and arguments and the constant noise of a large, happy family. Cole built additions onto the house, adding bedrooms and a larger kitchen, a front parlor where Willow could hold her teaching sessions. The ranch prospered, growing from 200 head of cattle to over 500, from barely scraping by to genuine success. Cole hired more hands, built a larger barn, bought better breeding stock. But through it all, through the work and the growth and the inevitable challenges, he and Willow remained the center of everything. They still sat together on the porch in the evenings when the children were in bed, still held hands across the dinner table, still looked at each other with the same love and wonder that had begun in a burning building all those years ago. On their 10th anniversary, Cole took Willow back to Cannon City for a special dinner at the hotel where they had had their wedding reception. The town had grown in the intervening years, new buildings replacing old ones, new people joining the community. The old boarding house site was now home to a dry goods store, all traces of the fire long since cleared away. "Do you ever think about that night?" Willow asked as they walked through town after dinner, revisiting the places of their courtship. "All the time," Cole admitted. "How could I not?" "That night changed everything." "I still have nightmares about it sometimes," Willow confessed. About being trapped in that room, about the smoke and the heat and the certainty I was going to die. But then I dream about you coming through the door, and it all becomes worth it. Every moment of terror was worth it because it brought me to you. Cole stopped walking and turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands the way he had that first night by the creek. I would run through 1,000 fires for you, Willow Oaks. I would do it again and again, as many times as it took, just to have this life with you. My hero, she said, just as she had on their wedding day, but the words carried a decade of shared life, of love tested and proven, of promises kept. Your husband, he corrected gently. Your partner. Your other half. All of that, Willow agreed. And so much more. They kissed there on the street, not caring who saw them, two people still deeply, wildly in love after 10 years of marriage and 4 children and all the ordinary magic of a life built together. The years continued to pass, marked by the growth of their children and the steady success of the ranch. Will grew into a serious young man who took after his father, loving the land and the work of ranching. Kathy was bright and spirited, with her mother's gift for teaching and her father's stubborn determination. James was the dreamer, always reading, always asking questions about the world beyond their ranch. Rose was the baby, sweet-natured and gentle, beloved by all her siblings. Willow continued teaching, her reputation growing until families were bringing their children from as far as 10 miles away for instruction. She never charged more than families could afford, and often taught for free when necessary. It was not about the money, she always said. It was about giving children the tools they would need to build good lives. Cole watched his wife with endless pride and admiration. She had adapted to ranch life so completely that he sometimes forgot she had not been born to it. She could deliver a calf as easily as she could teach a child to read, could manage the household accounts as efficiently as she could manage a classroom. She was the heart of their home, the center around which everything else revolved, and he fell more in love with her every single day. When Cole turned 45 and Willow 42, they took stock of their lives one evening and marveled at how far they had come. The ranch was thriving, valued at over $50,000. Their children were healthy and happy, each finding their own path in the world. Will was talking about starting his own spread on the north section of their land. Kathy had been accepted to Teachers College in Denver and would be leaving in the fall. James wanted to become a doctor, inspired by old Doc Morrison, who still made his rounds at 75. Rose was only 10 but already showing promise as a musician, teaching herself to play the piano they had bought last year. We did good, Cole said, holding Willow close as they watched a spectacular sunset paint their land in gold and crimson. We did very good, Willow agreed. Better than I ever dreamed possible that night when I was trapped in that burning building, certain my life was over. Your life was just beginning, Cole said. Our life was just beginning. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not been there that night? If you had sold your cattle a day earlier or a day later, if you had not heard me screaming, if you had not been brave enough to run into that fire? I try not to think about it, Cole admitted. It is too terrible to contemplate. A world without you in it, without our children, without this life we have built. I cannot imagine it, and I do not want to. Neither can I. Willow turned in his arms to face him, her green eyes still as bright and beautiful as they had been at 25. You saved my life that night, Cole. But you have given me so much more than just my life. You have given me love and partnership and a family and a home and a purpose. You have given me everything. You have given me just as much, Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. More even. Before you, I was just going through the motions, building something without really knowing why. You gave me the why, Willow. You gave me a reason for everything. They kissed as the sun set, two people who had found each other in fire and built a life that was solid and good and real. It had not always been easy. There had been hard years when the cattle prices dropped, when drought threatened their water supply, when illness swept through and they feared for their children. But they had faced it all together, and that had made all the difference. As they grew older, as their children grew up and started families of their own, Cole and Willow remained best friends and lovers, partners in every sense of the word. They celebrated grandchildren and anniversaries, survived setbacks, and rejoiced in triumphs. They grew old together on the ranch they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, living the legacy of love that had started with a scream in the night and a cowboy brave enough to run through flames. On their 50th anniversary, when Cole was 75 and Willow was 72, they renewed their vows in the same church where they had married, surrounded by 4 children, 16 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. Cole's hair was white now, his face weathered by decades of sun and wind, but his eyes were still clear and bright when he looked at his wife. Willow's auburn hair had faded to silver, her hands were gnarled with arthritis, but her smile was just as radiant as it had been at 25. "I would do it all again," Cole said when the Reverend asked if he would take this woman to be his wife. "Every moment, every choice, every single day. I would choose you every time, Willow Oaks." "And I would choose you," Willow said, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "My hero. My husband. My everything." They kissed, and the church erupted in applause and cheers, 3 generations celebrating a love story that had become legendary in Cannon City. The tale of the cowboy who ran through flames to save the schoolteacher, who married her 3 weeks later, who built a life and a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. Cole and Willow lived another decade together, dying within months of each other at the ages of 85 and 82. They were buried side by side in the Cannon City Cemetery, their joined headstone reading simply, "Cole and Willow Oaks, united by fire, bound by love, eternal in spirit." Their ranch passed to Will, who ran it with the same dedication his father had shown, keeping the Oaks name prominent in Colorado ranching circles. Kathy became a renowned educator, founding a teaching college that trained generations of frontier teachers. James became a doctor who brought modern medicine to rural Colorado communities. Rose married a musician and filled her life with beauty and song. The story of Cole and Willow became the stuff of family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. How he had heard her calling for help. How he had run into a burning building without hesitation. How he had carried her out through smoke and flames. How they had fallen in love almost instantly and built a life that was the envy of everyone who knew them. But beyond the dramatic rescue, beyond the romantic courtship and the happy ending, what endured was the truth at the heart of their story. They had chosen each other every single day. Through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow, through the ordinary moments that made up a life. They had chosen love over fear, partnership over independence, together over alone. And in the end, that was the real legacy they left behind. Not the successful ranch or the accomplished children or the material wealth they had accumulated, but the proof that true love existed, that it was worth fighting for, worth running through fire for, worth building an entire life around. Their great-great-granddaughter, named Willow in honor of her ancestor, stood at their graves on a warm September day in 1982, exactly 100 years after the fire that had started it all. She had just gotten engaged herself, and she touched the headstone gently, feeling the connection across time. "Thank you," she whispered to the couple she had never met, but felt she knew intimately through all the stories. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for loving each other so completely. Thank you for showing us all what is possible when two people truly commit to building a life together. The wind blew through the cemetery, rustling the leaves of the cottonwood trees, and young Willow could have sworn she felt a presence, a warmth, a blessing from beyond. She thought about her own love story just beginning, about the man waiting for her back in Cannon City, about the future they would build together. And she knew with absolute certainty that she would love him the way Cole had loved Willow. Completely. Fearlessly. With her whole heart and soul, for as long as she lived. Because that was the real gift her ancestors had given her. Not money or property or status, but the knowledge that love like that was possible, that it was real, that it was worth everything. She walked back to her car with her head held high, and her heart full of hope, carrying forward the legacy of the cowboy who ran through flames, and the woman whose voice had called him to his destiny. Their love story would live on, generation after generation, proof that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the very best ones, and that true love, when you find it, is worth any risk, any sacrifice, any leap of faith required to hold on to it forever.